The thunder of hooves drowned out Olivia Daniels' desperate cries as her carriage careened down the steep Wyoming hillside in the spring of 1876, the wheels catching on rocks and threatening to overturn with each jarring bump. Her fingers clutched the leather seat until her knuckles turned white, her heart hammering against her ribs as the runaway horses pulled the vehicle faster down the incline. The wedding dress she'd spent months sewing lay in tatters around her ankles, torn during her hasty escape from a ceremony that would have bound her to a man she could never love. Whoa there! A deep voice cut through the chaos as a lean figure on horseback appeared, racing alongside the carriage. He leaned from his saddle, his strong arms reaching for the reins of the panicked horses. With expert precision, he guided them to a stop just before the carriage would have plummeted into a ravine. Olivia sat frozen, her breath coming in short gasps as dust settled around the carriage. When she finally managed to look up, she found herself staring into the most intense gray eyes she'd ever seen, belonging to a tall man who now stood beside the carriage door. "You all right, madam?" he asked, tipping his hat back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and a strong jawline shadowed with stubble. "Yes, her voice caught as pain shot through her ankle when she tried to move. "Perhaps not entirely." He reached for her without hesitation, his arms strong and sure as he lifted her from the carriage. "Name's Virgil Forrester. Let's get you somewhere safe before those horses decide to bolt again." "Olivia Daniels," she replied, wincing as he set her down gently on a flat rock. "I'm greatly indebted to you, Mr. Forrester." Virgil knelt to examine her ankle, his touch gentle despite his weathered appearance. "This needs tending. My ranch is just over that ridge. I can take you there, get you fixed up before you continue your journey." His eyes took in her tattered wedding dress. "Though it seems to me you might be running from something rather than to something." Olivia tensed. "My personal affairs are not your concern." A smile tugged at his lips. "Fair enough, but I reckon a woman fleeing in a wedding dress has a story worth telling." He stood, offering his hand. "Whatever you're running from, you're safe with me." Something in his steady gaze made her believe him. With a reluctant nod, she allowed him to help her onto his horse, her white dress billowing around them like a cloud against the dusty landscape. Virgil's ranch was modest but well kept, with a sturdy main house and a small barn nestled against rolling hills. He carried Olivia inside, setting her on a worn but clean sofa before fetching supplies to tend her ankle. "You live here alone?" she asked as he gently wrapped her swollen ankle. "Just me and the cattle," he replied. "Had a foreman until last month. Man decided to try his luck in the gold fields." His fingers worked methodically, securing the bandage. "You're welcome to stay until you heal up. Got a spare room that's decent enough." Olivia hesitated. Staying with a stranger, a man, went against everything she'd been taught about propriety. But the alternative was returning to Millfield, to face her father's wrath and the humiliation of having left Edward Harrison at the altar. "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted softly. Virgil nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then you'll stay here until you do." Days turned into weeks as Olivia's ankle healed. She learned that Virgil had inherited the ranch 5 years earlier after his parents died in a flash flood. He worked from sunrise to sunset, his dedication to the land evident in every calloused hand and sunburned line on his face. Determined not to be a burden, Olivia took over the cooking and mending. Having grown up in a wealthy merchant's home in Boston, she had never prepared a meal until she arrived at the ranch. Her first attempts were disastrous burned biscuits and watery stew that even the ranch dog-eyed suspiciously. "This is..." Virgil paused after his first bite of her beef and potato pie, searching for a diplomatic word. "Terrible," Olivia finished for him, laughing despite herself. "I never learned to cook. My father had servants for that." Instead of mocking her, Virgil spent that evening patiently showing her how to prepare a simple meal. His hands guided hers as they kneaded dough for biscuits, their fingers sometimes brushing in a way that sent unexpected warmth through her body. "My mother always said cooking is just like ranching," he told her as they worked side by side. You have to respect what you're working with and pay attention to the signs. By the end of the month, Olivia could prepare a meal that didn't threaten to poison them both. More importantly, she found herself looking forward to the evenings when they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in brilliant oranges and purples. One evening, as they sat in comfortable silence, Virgil finally asked the question she'd been dreading. "Why'd you run, Olivia?" She stared at the horizon, gathering her courage. "I was meant to marry Edward Harrison, a business arrangement between his family and mine. I'd never even spoken to him alone before our wedding day." She twisted her hands in her lap. "When I saw him waiting at the altar, looking at me like I was cattle at auction, I couldn't do it. I ran to the carriage and told the driver to take me to the train station. He refused, so I grabbed the reins myself." Virgil whistled low. "Brave thing to do. Foolish, my father would say." She looked down at her hands, now rough from ranch work. "I was raised to dance at parties, play the pianoforte, and be an ornament for a wealthy husband. None of those skills are particularly useful here in Wyoming territory." "You're learning new ones," Virgil pointed out. "And doing mighty well at it." His compliment warmed her more than it should have. As summer bloomed across the prairie, Olivia found herself transformed. Her pale skin browned under the Wyoming sun, and her soft hands developed calluses from helping with chores. She learned to ride properly, not side saddle as she had in Boston, but straddling a horse like the local women did. The freedom of galloping across the open plains became a joy she looked forward to each day. She also discovered that Virgil was more than just a rancher. In the evenings, he would sometimes take out a violin and play hauntingly beautiful melodies that drifted through the summer air. He had books, classics, and poetry that surprised her, and they would sometimes read to each other by lamplight. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked one evening after he finished a particularly moving piece. "My mother taught me. She was from Philadelphia originally, came west with my father after they married." He carefully put the violin back in its case. "She believed a person could be both tough enough for frontier life and refined enough to appreciate beauty." "She sounds wonderful." She was. His eyes grew distant with memory. "They held dances sometimes in the settlement, nothing fancy like your Boston balls, I expect. But folks would gather at the meeting house, push the benches aside, and dance until dawn." Olivia tensed at the mention of dancing. "I won't be attending any dances." Virgil raised an eyebrow. "Not fond of dancing? I loved it once." She stared into the fireplace, memories washing over her. "My last night in Boston, there was a ball at my father's house. I overheard Edward telling his friends that he was only marrying me for my father's shipping connections. He said I was plain but would serve well enough as a mother for his children." Her voice hardened. "I'll never dance again." "Not when it only served to make me a prize to be won." Virgil studied her for a long moment. "Seems to me that's giving this Edward fellow power he doesn't deserve." "Perhaps, but the decision is made." Summer faded into autumn, and still Olivia remained at the ranch. She sent a letter to her cousin in Boston, asking her to inform her family that she was safe but would not be returning. The reply came weeks later. Her father had disowned her, declaring that he no longer had a daughter. The news should have devastated her, but Olivia found herself strangely unbothered. She had built a life here, one where she was valued for her contributions rather than her family name or dowry. She had friends now among the neighboring ranchers' wives, women who had taught her to preserve vegetables for winter and shoot a rifle to protect the chicken coop from foxes. And then there was Virgil. Their relationship had evolved into something deeper than friendship, though neither had spoken of it. She caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. His hand would linger when he helped her onto her horse, and sometimes their conversations would trail into comfortable silence filled with unspoken words. The first snow of winter arrived early that year, blanketing the land in pristine white. Olivia stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching as Virgil brought in firewood. "Storm's coming," he said, nodding toward dark clouds gathering on the horizon. "Might be a bad one." By nightfall, the wind howled around the house, driving snow against the windows with fierce determination. They sat close to the fire, the howling storm making the ranch house seem smaller and more intimate. "Might be snowed in for a few days," Virgil commented, stoking the fire. Olivia found the prospect didn't trouble her as it once might have. "I've nowhere else I need to be." He looked at her then, something vulnerable in his eyes. "Do you ever think about going back east, to civilization?" The question caught her off guard. "No, not anymore." She met his gaze steadily. "This is my home now." Something shifted in his expression, hope mingled with uncertainty. "Olivia, a tremendous crash interrupted him as something struck the roof. Virgil was on his feet immediately, grabbing his coat. "Stay here," he ordered, heading for the door. "I most certainly will not," Olivia replied, already pulling on her own coat. "Two sets of hands are better than one." Outside, the wind nearly knocked her over. Through the swirling snow, she could see that a large branch had fallen from the old oak tree, damaging part of the roof near the barn. Together, they worked to secure the livestock and assess the damage, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. As they struggled back toward the house, Virgil's foot hit a patch of ice. He fell backward, pulling Olivia down with him. They landed in a snowdrift, his arms instinctively wrapping around her to cushion her fall. For a moment they lay there, faces inches apart, the snow swirling around them. Olivia could feel the solid warmth of his body beneath hers, see the snowflakes catching on his eyelashes. Without thinking, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Virgil's hand came up to cradle the back of her head. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily despite the cold. "I've been wanting to do that for months," he confessed, his voice rough. Olivia smiled, snow melting on her flushed cheeks. "As have I." They made it back to the house, shedding wet clothes and warming themselves by the fire. That night, Olivia fell asleep in Virgil's arms, listening to the storm rage outside while feeling safer than she ever had in her life. When spring arrived, bringing new calves and wildflowers to the prairie, Virgil proposed. Not with flowery words or grand gestures, but with simple honesty as they sat on the porch watching the sunrise. "I love you, Olivia," he said, taking her hand in his. "I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." She answered by kissing him, her heart too full for words. Their wedding was small, held on the ranch with neighbors and friends in attendance. Olivia wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. They exchanged vows under the same oak tree that had lost its branch in the winter storm, now sprouting new leaves in the spring sunshine. That evening, as lanterns illuminated the ranch yard and a neighbor played fiddle tunes, Virgil held out his hand to her. "Dance with me," he said softly. Olivia hesitated, remembering her vow. "I told you I would never dance again." Virgil stepped closer, his voice low and meant only for her. "Dance forever with me, Olivia, not for show, not for others, but for us, for joy." Looking into his eyes, Olivia realized that the dance he offered was nothing like the empty social rituals of her past. This was an invitation to share in life's rhythm together, to move through the world as partners. She placed her hand in his. "Forever sounds just right." As they swayed together under the star-filled Wyoming sky, Olivia knew she had found what she never expected, a love born not from family connections or social expectations, but from shared work, mutual respect, and the courage to begin anew. Their life together was not without challenges. The harsh Wyoming winters threatened their cattle, and drought years tested their resolve. 3 years after their wedding, a group of cattle rustlers targeted ranches in the area. Virgil was shot defending their herd, the bullet grazing his shoulder in a terrifying reminder of the frontier's dangers. Olivia tended his wound with steady hands, her fear masked by determination. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered as she cleaned the injury. "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied, his smile strained but genuine. "We've got too many dances left." It had become their private phrase over the years, an acknowledgement of their partnership, their commitment to facing life together. When their first child was born, a daughter they named Margaret, after Virgil's mother Olivia found new depth to her love for both her husband and their life together. Virgil held their daughter with such tenderness that Olivia's heart seemed to expand in her chest, making room for this new, overwhelming love. "She has your eyes," Virgil whispered, gazing down at the infant. "Heaven help me when she's grown, I'll be chasing off suitors with my shotgun." Olivia laughed, tired but happier than she'd ever been. "Perhaps she'll be the one doing the chasing. She is my daughter, after all." As their family grew to include a son 2 years later, the ranch prospered under their joint care. Olivia used her knowledge of business, gleaned from years of observing her father's shipping enterprise, to help expand their operations. They added sheep to their cattle, discovering that the wool could bring steady income even when beef prices fluctuated. Word of Olivia's business acumen spread, and neighboring ranchers began seeking her advice. Some men resented taking guidance from a woman, but Virgil always stood firmly by her side, proud of her intelligence and refusing to let others diminish her contributions. "My wife sees opportunities where others see only obstacles," he would say, his arm around her shoulders. "I'd be a fool not to listen." 10 years after Olivia had fled her wedding in Boston, a letter arrived that reopened old wounds. Her father was dying and wished to see her one last time. After days of internal struggle, she decided to make the journey east, taking 9-year-old Margaret and 7-year-old James to meet the grandfather they had never known. "Are you sure about this?" Virgil asked as he prepared to drive them to the train station. "You don't owe him anything." Olivia touched her husband's face, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm not going for him. I'm going for me, to close that chapter properly." Boston seemed smaller than she remembered, its elegant streets and brick townhouses no longer impressive after years of Wyoming's vast horizons. Her father's house, once the center of her world, felt stifling and overdecorated. Thomas Daniels, once robust and commanding, was now a frail old man confined to his bed. His eyes, however, still held the sharp intelligence that had built his shipping empire. "So you came," he said when Olivia entered his bedroom, her children hanging back shyly. "Yes." She sat beside his bed, her back straight, no longer the daughter seeking approval but a woman secure in her own worth. "You look different," he observed, studying her sun-browned skin and capable hands. "I am different." The conversation that followed was difficult, with years of hurt and misunderstanding between them. Her father spoke of his disappointment when she fled, of the scandal it caused, of Edward Harrison marrying another merchant's daughter within months. "And yet you seem to have done well for yourself," he finally acknowledged, glancing at her children who stood politely by the door. "They are well-mannered. The boy has your mother's chin." "They are being raised with love," Olivia said simply, "and the freedom to choose their own paths." Before they left, her father did something unexpected. He changed his will, leaving Olivia a portion of his fortune. "Not because you need it," he told her, "but because you earned it by proving me wrong." When they returned to Wyoming, Virgil was waiting at the station, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of them. He swept both children up in his arms, then pulled Olivia into an embrace that felt like coming home. "Welcome back," he whispered against her hair. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch as they had so many times before. Olivia told him about her father, about the inheritance that could change their lives if they chose to use it. "We could build a bigger house," she said. "Hire more help for the ranch, send the children east for education when they're older if they want it." Virgil considered this, his face thoughtful in the lamplight. "What do you want, Olivia?" She looked out at the ranch they had built together, the expanded barn, the thriving herds, the small schoolhouse they had helped establish for the children of neighboring ranches. "I want our children to have choices," she said finally. The education to pursue whatever life calls to them, whether that's ranching or something else entirely. I want to perhaps build that clinic we've talked about, so families don't have to travel so far for medical care. Virgil nodded, a smile spreading across his face. Then that's what we'll do. As the years passed, their ranch became the heart of a growing community. The small medical clinic they built served ranchers from miles around. Their home remained modest, but was expanded to accommodate visiting teachers who came to instruct local children in subjects beyond the basics offered at the small schoolhouse. Margaret grew into a young woman with her mother's determination and her father's calm strength. She showed a remarkable aptitude for medicine, eventually traveling east to attend one of the few medical schools that accepted women. James, quieter but equally bright, discovered a passion for the law and its applications in the still developing territories. When the children were grown and building their own lives, Olivia and Virgil found themselves alone again, much as they had been at the beginning. Their bodies showed the marks of years of ranch work, Virgil's hands permanently calloused. Olivia's once smooth skin lined from years in the sun, but they wore these marks proudly, as badges of a life well lived. On their 30th wedding anniversary, neighbors and friends gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Tables laden with food stretched across the yard, and lanterns hung from trees, casting a warm glow as twilight descended. As music started up, a mix of fiddles and guitars played by local musicians, Virgil extended his hand to Olivia, just as he had on their wedding night. "Dance with me," he said, his voice older but still carrying that same warmth that had first captured her heart. Without hesitation, Olivia placed her hand in his. They moved together in perfect harmony, their steps sure despite aging joints. Around them, younger couples joined in, including their own children with their spouses. "Look at what we built," Virgil murmured against her ear as they danced. Olivia followed his gaze across the gathering, not just the ranch buildings and the prosperous land, but the community of people whose lives had intertwined with theirs over the decades. She saw Margaret, now a respected doctor, dancing with her husband. James stood nearby, his arm around his wife as they watched their own small children play. "We did well, didn't we?" she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Better than well." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I promised you forever, remember?" Olivia smiled, thinking of that frightened young woman who had vowed never to dance again, and how different her life would have been if Virgil hadn't shown her that love could be a partnership of equals. A dance where both partners moved in harmony without either one leading all the time. "Forever," she agreed, tightening her arms around him as they continued to sway beneath the star-filled Wyoming sky. And we're still just getting started. As night deepened and the celebration continued around them, they remained in each other's arms, two people who had found in each other not just love, but the courage to create a life neither could have imagined alone. Their dance would continue through whatever joys and sorrows lay ahead, their steps in perfect rhythm forever.